If you're what they call a shy guy, that's when you really feel it. You don't know how to make people like you, and you find yourself holding a grudge against them. You're standing on the outside looking in. You might have something to contribute to their conversation, but nobody cares whether you do or not. There's a barrier, and you don't know how to begin breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down.
I had just started daycare. I was a pasty, lanky kid who rarely talked. I was terrified of daycare. The idea of being surrounded by strangers was a thing worse than death. The idea of connecting was beyond my grasp. What to say, how to say it. I looked at the other kids from the borders of my Game Boy and watched them wander. They were also playing games on their Game Boys, but they were doing it together. They were constantly talking and enjoying what each other were doing with something, to me, was a thing I did wholly alone. The games I played didn't help me learn to speak. I mean, I loved Metal Walker and Super Mario Advance, but they weren't really handheld games. What I mean is the fact that these games were on handheld was incidental. Other than the idea of bringing the game on the go, there was no forethought to truly make an experience that should be taken on the go. With all this in mind, these games allowed me to isolate, as that was what was encouraged. Cut to a week into my daycare stay. Again, I sat alone. The room was crowded and loud. Out of the corner of my eye, a smaller kid with a small smile entered my view beyond the illuminated screen. "Hey kid," he shouted. I responded only with a mumble. "Would you want to trade games?" I looked at my used ET game and quickly agreed. He showed me a small group of games, all of which seemed to blur together, except one. Popping it in, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had joined something. It wasn't a big something, mind you, but it meant something. I noticed soon after this brief experience how different this daycare was than my regular school. The kids were focused entirely on a thing I had only scratched the surface of: Pokemon. This was the first environment where I wasn't scolded or ostracized for enjoying games. Pokemon was the great equalizer. It didn't matter if you were good at sports or you had the coolest clothes, it mattered that you liked Pokemon. You didn't have to be the best or know everything about the game to be accepted either. It was a collective experience to play with other kids around me. It's akin to running a marathon where the race is much more about pushing yourself and others than trying to be the very best. Handing back the Emerald cartridge to the other boy as I was waiting to be taken home, I knew what I needed to do. Forcibly, I cried to get a Pokemon game, and after many long hours of desperate wails, I got the key to these new kids around me. At this moment, I understood how to have common interests with my peers. Though I enjoyed the complexities of games and the world it creates, I was taken most importantly with the social aspect of the game. It gave me a voice. Within the week, I was having several kids coming up to me and asking what Pokemon I had and what my thoughts were on the changes between Emerald from Sapphire, Ruby, or Fire Red, or so on. I even gave them full-fledged responses and looked at them when they spoke. I was happy to talk to them. Video games at that point wasn't something to hide behind or block out the world. Now it was a way for me to connect. I then began approaching other kids and actually starting conversations about Pokemon, and then even things not related to Pokemon. My ability to be a social human being, weirdly enough, was shaped through these small Poke-themed conversations. The fundamentals of finding common interest, learning how to find interest in things outside of my own, and most importantly, the confidence to begin these interactions, was shaped by a quirky little handheld game my parents always said was a waste of time. Looking back, it was no fluke that the game created this environment. The game was made with some very implicit design choices that allowed this type of play. Firstly, the games are centered around a large amount of little choices that spark the need for discussion and propagates interaction deeper than other standard experiences. The first choice you make in the actual game is arguably the most important in how you will set up your team. You're given the choice of 3 starting Pokemon that you can't find anywhere else in the world, so this choice becomes monumentous even if it may not appear to be. The choice informs how you'll craft your team, and that paired with the sheer number of Pokemon that have been created for these games, the difference in playstyles can seem infinite. This use of choice goes into how people talk about Pokemon, as there are usually 3 questions asked by every person when they find out you play the game. Which starter did you choose? What is your team? And what version do you have? Though, these questions are just the tip of the iceberg as these complex game experiences become personal for each player. You grow an attachment to each Pokemon as they have their own characteristics and description and abilities. With this in mind, the conversations had become a deeper and more enriching one as each player is able to outline their tactics, their experiences with different Pokemon, and how challenging certain sections of the game were based on how they decided to load out their team. The second design decision is something the creator Satoshi Tajiri has stated is the basis for why the game is on handhelds. At the start of the Pokemon game series in 1996, they were on the Game Boy Color system, which had a connection cable that was primarily used to compete against other players in any given game that used this add-on, though Satoshi saw a missed opportunity in this use. The communication aspect of Game Boy. It was a profound image to me, the thought of actual living organisms moving back and forth across the cable. I wanted to design a game that involved interactive communication. That last line, I believe, completely encapsulates the biggest reason the games were so big when they first came out, and how they continue to be. The idea that the use of handheld should be an inherent social one is something profoundly obvious. Of course, these worlds we bring in our pockets would be extensions of a person's interaction away from the home console. I also like the idea of the use of the communication cable as a way of moving living organisms between systems. This idea of organisms being transferred can easily be seen as a metaphor for the ideas and connections that the gamers using the communication cable will inevitably make as they discuss Pokemon and related subjects. Anyway, to wrap up my not-so-little story, I inevitably for one reason or another left said daycare, and though I continued my love of Pokemon games and affiliated media, I could never find a gaming experience quite like what was found in there. It was a society of lost boys and girls with its own rules and ideals and real-life social situations that just wasn't possible without such a closed space like that. Until now. On July 7th, 2016, Pokemon and the game studio Niantic presented what the world, at least for these next few months, would be in love with. Head over heels. Story after story came out about the seemingly life-changing experience that was Pokemon Go. I was slow to engage in this new game. I put it off for a few days thinking it was going to be a shallow and flash-of-the-pan thing. But then after noticing friends who had no interest in the Pokemon universe suddenly getting very excited about catching Pokemon with the same childlike passion I had when I was younger, I had to give it a try. Immediately, I was hooked. At first, I played alone because I was out with family in Nebraska, and well, beyond not knowing many people there, it still seemed like this niche thing. My friends, though lacking knowledge about Pokemon, were still very much gamers, and so I avoided talking about the game outside of these circles. Then as I played and got a fair bit of exercise in the process, I got to learn the neighborhoods I walked through. I began learning the directions of places I had no reason to know. The world around me became interesting and more engaging through this game. The game brought me into nature and gave me time to reflect how good it felt to be outside. I found myself giving up other games altogether for the next few weeks. I was outside, I was active, I felt better overall. Then the real revelation came when I finally got to be back home with friends for a week. Everything changed my eyes about what this game was and what games could do. We went out on late night excursions where we'd take turns driving around our seemingly mundane little town that before we never took any notice of. We explored parks and landmarks and I loved it. Then there was the people. I met people that I would never talk to otherwise in these moments. Pokemon allowed us to connect. Again in my life, it got me to open up to those in my community I had in general stayed the hell away from. Does that mean that every interaction was life-changing? Of course not. But it leveled the playing field in my eyes. Even beyond the game, after dealing with these new different social interactions through Pokemon Go, I felt a sense of openness with strangers now. I'm not one to go out of my comfort zone when it comes to people, so it fundamentally helped me socially as an adult, which I feel like sounds terrible, but I think it's actually good that games can do this. The game uses the same familiar facets to engage social play and a fair bit of nuance. They allow the same starter Pokemon choice in the beginning of the game, though this choice is slightly shallow in its new context, being that you can get these Pokemon later on in the game. But another choice does take its place, and this choice is arguably more interesting than choices made in the original Pokemon games. You're allowed to pick one of 3 new teams, Instinct, Mystic, and Valor. These teams are an immediate choice after attaining level 5, and it is one that will decide which people you will fight in gyms, meaning anyone on the other 2 teams. Fundamentally, I feel like this choice puts the idea that Pokemon is entirely a game of socially connecting with other players on its head. This choice is inherently a competitive one, though there is a camaraderie in the way that it shapes what relationships you have with different players based on their decisions on team. After playing the game, I began to feel the same collective gaming society I had left in daycare. I watched as people bonded and connected over what is a simple iPhone app with the Pokemon license as a code. It was invigorating to go out with friends and spend hours wandering around old parks and spots I used to wander as a kid. The game breaks the chains of the small niche groups of diehard fans and brings all age groups and non-gamers into this new way to look at the world. Something like a revolution has arrived. Maybe a bit lofty, you scoff, but the pure beauty of how a game based on pocket monsters that a year ago was seen as a way to waste time and be lazy is now making people get up and be active and talk to people we never talked to. Other people in our community, for example, is not only a great thing for the Pokemon brand, it's great for games. We all need to take notice at how games can be an internationally massive force that can help people communicate and even more surprisingly, be active and explore the world outside of our homes. Thank you for watching. Please consider contributing to my Patreon so that I can have the ability to continually create quality content.
Need touch fine-tuning again, either at the set or on the remote unit. But if you want touch, and you can adjust fine-tuning to suit your taste at any time. If you overtune on this or any other control, just push the companion button to reverse the direction of the control. In the same way, press this rocker bar to adjust the color, variable all the way from black and white to maximum color intensity. To adjust the tint control for natural face tones, press the right rocker bar.